This video will be about finding a hole in the center of a circle. In terms of this lid, putting a hole in it to make a wheel for the car. One important thing with the wheel is to minimize the friction on the inside. When we do glue the wheel, you want to make sure the glue is only on the outside, not on the inside where it's going to meet the axle. And you'll also want the wheel to be glued so that it's at right angles to the axle so that it doesn't wobble and hit the frame. But we're going to start by figuring out how to get a hole right in the center of the circle. And so I'll first talk about that. One way of finding the center of a circle is to use a compass. So I can make several circles on the inside of this circle as long as they're all the same diameter, where every place that these circles cross each other will give points that will make diameters. It's clearer if we actually show it, so I'll make some examples. There's a half circle, and now I'll make an arc of a circle on the other side. And where these circles intersect, that's one of the diameters of this larger circle. So here is one of the diameters lines. If I find another diameter line that runs perpendicular, I'll have the intersection of those two lines will be the center of this larger circle, or this lid. So right where these circles cross, that's the center. Now it's easy to be a little bit off with this method, and since we're using lids formed out of plastic, there's often an injection site near the center. So if we look at that, I'll draw a circle around it. That's another way of finding out where the center of the lid is. And sometimes there's even a raised dot right in the center. And you can see one of my lines is a little bit off by about 1 millimeter to the side. So this method can be a better way of finding that center. Also, it's good, you see this circle around that injection site. If you can make a good circle that helps you figure out where that center is, then as you're opening up the hole, this hole, you can, if you're a little bit off, you can carefully, moving the pair of scissors around on the inside, you can get it set up so that, or you can adjust if it's off center a little bit. And I forgot something very important, since I'll be poking a hole through this and also going to be using the scissors. I should have something underneath to protect the surface of the table, so I'm going to get a piece of cardboard. So now you can see the cardboard that's going to protect the table from the tack and the scissors. I'm going to move this out of the way for now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start a small hole, and start it slowly, right in the center, as close to the center as I can. I'm just going to push it through not too far so I don't damage the table. So I don't know if you can see that, but the hole so we started a hole. And we can use our stick to make the hole a little bit wider. We're not going to open it up all the way because that could cause a crack, which would damage the lid. So do this part kind of slowly. And what I'm trying to do is I want to open it up just enough so that I can use the scissors to widen it. So now I'm going to put one blade of the scissor in that hole and just turn the lid around like that to make the hole a little bit wider. My goal is to make the hole as wide as this stick, no wider. If it's wider than the stick, then it will be very difficult to attach the lid to the axle. And as you're doing this, you should check to see if it stays in the center. One way of checking if it's in the center is you can put it on the stick and actually use let's see, I'll actually use this axle. What I need to do is check to see if as I rotate it, does it stay the same distance away from, in this case, from my finger. It's kind of hard to tell if it's trying to make it even. Another way to also test the center, and the compass can help with this, is I can adjust the compass so that it's measuring the distance from the edge of the lid to the center of the circle on one side, and then check that from the other side to see if the hole is the same distance. And if it's the same distance from two sides of the circle, then you know it's in the center. I'm going to make it just a little bit wider, and then I'll attach the stick. A drill can also help a lot with this, but right now I don't have a drill, so I'm working with what I have. And now when I put this onto the stick, I want to make sure that it looks like one side of this has the lip. So I want the lip to end up on the outside so that it's not rubbing against the body of the car. So that looks like that will work. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue it. And when you glue it, you want to use a very small amount of glue because otherwise you'll melt the lid and that will make the lid uneven. Also, you want to make sure you're gluing it in a way that's perpendicular to the stick. So using the edge of a table can help to make sure that it's straight up. Use the prop of a box to show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to pause it for a moment. So imagine that this is the center, or is the edge of the table. I can use that to make sure this is going straight down from the lid. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a very small amount of glue. And I'm going to spread the glue out into a line. This will help give rigidity to keep the wheel from going into an angle. And I'm not putting on so much glue as to melt the lid. So I want to be careful, just a little bit of glue at a time, because otherwise the lid could melt. And before the glue cools, you want to make sure that it's straight. Another way that you can also check to see if it's straight is you can put it in the car and turn it and check to see if it remains the same distance from the edge of the car as it turns. So it's wobbling a little bit, but not too much. So we can work with this. So those are two methods. You can use the edge of the car, or you can use the car and the distance from the side of the car as it rotates, or you can use a table and use the table as a reference. Another technique they can also use is using the edge of a paper that's a right angle. So another way of checking is to use a sheet of paper like this. And then check that you have a right angle on all sides. So any of those ways should work. And most importantly, when your wheel is attached to your car, it shouldn't wobble too much. As long as it's not actually brushing the side of the car, you're okay. So I have a little bit of a wobble here. A little bit less would be better, but that's enough. I can work with it. And then you repeat the process. This wheel, that's already been done. So I'm just going to put this on the other side of the car. In this case, I won't be able to hold it up like I did for this wheel. So I'll just use the distance to the edge of the car. And I can also check with a piece of paper like this. But I'll use the same technique. There should be a little bit of space between these parts, because if these are actually squeezed together, they'll keep the car from being able to rotate freely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put just a little bit of cardboard between this wheel and the axle casing, and that will keep the wheel, that will make sure there's a little bit of space. So I'm going to take this piece of cardboard out when I'm done, but for right now, while I'm gluing the other wheel, this will make sure I have just enough space so it's not too tight. And I use the same technique that I did before. I'll first put the glue in the center and then make a bead coming out. And then do the opposite side. Again, I'm just making thin beads of glue because if I put too much hot glue, that could melt the wheel and that would cause trouble for me. And then I want to try to make sure it's level. Another way that once you have one wheel, if one wheel's level, you could use some things that are the same distance between the two wheels and just prop it up on more than one side. Let's see if I can. Should have made this measurement before. I don't think I have time to do that before the glue dries, so I'll just use the method of checking as it rotates. So it looks like here it's a little bit close, so I'm going to try to adjust that before the glue is completely cooled. I have a little bit more of a wobble on this side than the other side. I also realized I used two different wheels and I didn't check to see if they're exactly the same diameter. So I will check that. So I checked, and actually this lid is about 0.5 millimeter in diameter larger than this lid. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo one of these wheels so that I have two that are equal. So that might take a minute, but I'm not going to include that whole process in the video because that will make the video, actually I guess I might as well fix it. I will fix it on this video. Another benefit to not using too much glue is it does make it easier if you have a mistake like this to undo it. So I'm gonna try twisting this glue from the axle to see if I can. Just pull it off to free it. And I'm gonna remove the rest of the glue that's on here. Because if any of this gets into that axle, it could create a lot of extra friction, which we don't want. So I'm going to make another wheel as quickly as I can, so that I have two identical ones. And I'll use the method of, I use that injection point as a guide. To finding the circle. I need a stick. So I'm using this to widen it just enough for to work it open the rest of the way using a pair of scissors. As you do this, you want to make sure that the hole is staying right in the center. And then I'll check it using this compass. So it's looking from the compass that this hole is pretty much centered. Actually looks like it's a little bit too much in that direction. So I'm a little bit too much in that direction, need to move it that way. And that way just a little bit. Actually, it's not really that clear. It might just have been some measurement error. If I go by this circle, it looks like it should go a little bit that way. So I'm going to try to widen the hole just a little bit in that direction, because using the circle that I traced around the plastic injection site, it looks like that's the direction it's off in. So I'm going to focus the scissor and widening it towards the side of the plastic where it's farther from the edge of that injection site. So hopefully that does that. And now what I'm doing is I'm pushing, I want to put the lid on this way, so I just want to make sure that this edge or this side of it is smooth and it's a little bit rough there. So I'm trying to push the plastic that I pushed aside to the other side of the lid. So that way this side is smooth and the rough side is here. So now I'm just going to put this on. And again, I still have this piece of cardboard. Is just making sure there's going to be a little bit of a gap when I'm done, so that nothing is creating excess friction. Like you see, like right now the wheel wasn't really rolling because it was too tight. So I'm loosening it just a little bit, even with that as to hold the gap. I want to make extra sure that it's not going to be too tight when I'm done, because once the glue's set, it would be really hard to adjust that. So right now it's loose enough, and then when I remove this cardboard, it will have an extra bit of give. So at this point, I'll repeat what I did before. I'm going to apply the glue from the center and drag it out to the side. And then I'll do the other side. So I'm making just thin strips of glue that move away from the center to help me align the wheel. And then as this cools, I'm going to make sure that it's the same distance all the way around. And also, it looks like I got it fairly close to the center, because if I hold something next to the edge of the wheel so the camera can see it, see that as the wheel turns it stays about the same distance from my finger. So this part of the wheel is it's coming a little bit closer, so I'm pushing that away. Okay, it looks like it's fairly well aligned. So the last step is I'm going to clip off the excess part of the stick, and I'm going to save it because we'll use this for making the hook that's going to go, that's going to be part of the powertrain that's going to connect the rear or the drive axle to the power supply. So if you can see this hook that's made to grab a piece of string that can pull the axle around, we can use this to provide that hook. So I'm just going to cut that off with this pair of pliers. You should not use scissors for this because this stick could definitely damage a pair of scissors. One last step, just for safety, I'm going to put a little bit of glue just at the end of that stick so that no one gets hurt with any splinters. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. And last thing to do is to remove that thing that was holding the gap. And now, as you can see, it turns fairly easily. So what you want is, if you spin the wheels, they should keep spinning for a little while before they come to a stop. The longer it takes them to come to a stop, the better your axle is. So that's the steering axle. The next video will be for this back part, but that's going to be a little bit more complicated.